Welcome to the Wildy West, a podcast dedicated to being the voice for wild horses. My name is Chase McGoran, and I'll be your host. Let's save these horses together. All I ask you to do is listen. It's hard to believe that a mere 2 centuries ago, the wild horse population along the eastern slopes of the Rocky Mountains numbered in the hundreds of thousands. The sound of their galloping hoofbeats reverberated across bunch grass meadows, coulées, and clear-flowing mountain streams. In those days, the annual spring gatherings would have brought together tens of thousands of wildies in one place, instead of the just over 100 it does now. Imagine what a breathtaking sight that would have been. More than 40,000 wild Alberta mountain horses gathered across the meadows and valleys of the eastern slope of the Rockies as far as the eye could see. Horses of every color. Bays, blacks, duns, grullas, grays, and sorrels. Bachelor stallions sparring with each other and hoping to win a mare or two. Family bands with mares and frolicking foals underfoot. A plethora of activity in every direction. Whinnies, neighs, and snorts filling the air. The smell of spring, glorious and new, as the warmth of the sun shines down on the bands. Unfortunately, those days of the great gatherings are long gone, never to be witnessed again in our generation or those of our children. The horses do still gather in the spring. However, their population has been decimated, reduced from 200,000 to less than 1,500, and stands a fragile reminder of what we have already lost. Less than 1,500 horses means they are well into the endangered species category, according to the IUCN, the International Union for the Conservation of Nature. According to the IUCN, any species with less than 2,500 mature adults or any subpopulation with less than 250 mature adults is classified as a species at risk. Hard to believe that with this definition to work from, the Alberta government thinks that allowing only 18 horses total instead of 250 in the Brazeau equine zone is somehow acceptable, or an acceptable number to sustain genetic diversity in that subpopulation. But all hope is not lost. Not yet. This is where people like today's guest, Sylvain Jette, come in. Sylvain is a wild horse advocate, photographer, and an admin on the Help Alberta Wildies Society Facebook page. He is a man with a passion for all creatures, large and small, and a fierce advocate for Alberta's wild mountain horses. Hello, Sylvain. Thank you for joining us today and taking some time out of your schedule. I understand you started your advocacy work with much smaller animals, cats and dogs. Can you tell me more about your work in dog and cat rescue?
For sure. So we've always, myself and my wife have always been, in love with animals and all that. In 2018, we ended up moving to Las Vegas for a few years because of my work. And my wife essentially retired from her work that she was doing here. She'd been in a company for about 32 years, I believe. She says, yeah, I'm quitting this job and I want to do something completely different. So what she started doing when we moved to Vegas is she started volunteering into an animal rescue company called Hearts Alive Village. And the rest became history. After a few months, she was hired full-time. And this is where things changed a lot for us. So it wasn't just having 2 dogs at home. It ended up seeing the best and the worst cases out there. It became a little bit, it was almost like an emotional roller coaster, essentially. And at one point we had to decide, okay, how many animals do we want to foster? How many do we want to keep? who do we want to keep? And we ended up making a decision that we would take the ones that were not adoptable or had a little chance of being adopted, which also comes with a lot more emotional, emotional baggage, because you're going to have an animal for less than a year, a few months, depending on the status. But I can tell you that in the last 6 years, so from 2018, well, a little over 6 years, 2018 to present, we fostered over 44 different cats and dogs.
Wow.
Some for life, some for years, some for a few months, depending on the situation. And all of them, and we've lost, obviously, several of them, which was very difficult. But at the same time, it was like, okay, let's go to the next one that needs help. And we continue to do this. So after we moved to Calgary in April 2024, my wife started volunteering for Meow Foundation, which is another cat rescue. And the cycle continues. So it's been very good. We've learned a lot from the experience for sure, but we've also learned that we get more satisfaction in giving back to an animal that has little chance of getting adopted by anyone. And a lot of the time we had animals that didn't want to be around humans. Mm-hmm. They come into our environment, and it seems to be set up that within a few months, the animal just becomes different. So it's kind of the pack is formed in such a way that the animal seems to adjust much quicker than normal. Mm-hmm. So anyway, that's kind of how it started. Yeah. And we're already looking for the next one right now. So
yeah. How many do you have?
Right now I've got 5 cats at home, 2 dogs. Mm-hmm. One dog is a tripod. He lost a leg. We have a partially paralyzed cat that we have to express 2 or 3 times a day. We have another cat that has rhinos, like some issues with sinuses, and it's got trouble breathing, has liver issue, and on and on. So every animal that we have has something unique and challenging that we have to deal with. Mm-hmm. Thankfully, the diet is the same for all the cats right now. But we're not stranger to if we have to get another cat that requires a special diet. We do have a separate room that will bring the animal in there just to adjust first, and then slowly introduce him or her to the rest of the pack that we have. I call it a pack now because this is almost how they interact with each other.
Because you have so many of them. Yeah. Right on. That's awesome. Can you tell me how you first became involved with wild horses?
Yeah, so when we were in Vegas, it's happened in Vegas. And of course, I had no clue that there was wild horses 35 minutes from the strip. Who would even know? So I started to do some research on wildlife and ended up finding a little bit of information in a little town that was about 40 minutes from outside of Vegas. And so one day I said, I'm just going to drive there and go and see. And of course, it's, almost impossible to find them over there. There's less horses out there. The weather is hot. Obviously, we're talking in Fahrenheit. It's usually over 100. Then the first thing I thought is, okay, what do they eat? Do they have water source? So I started thinking about that a lot. Anyway, on my first visit, I ended up seeing one band of horses. There were about 4 of them, I believe. So I started taking pictures and just being respectful and so on. And then I went back home and I started looking at the picture and just started thinking about that first experience, because when I went, it ended up being May 2021, which is fall season. So I saw this foal that looked like it was maybe a day old, but I didn't know much about horses then, but it looked so small. So anyway, somebody gave me a name of a lady that her name is Tara Kilpatrick. She has been monitoring wild horses out there for, I think, 32 or 33 years now. And so I reached out to her by using Facebook Messenger, sent her pictures that I took. I said, hey, blah, blah, blah. Just so you know, I went out there and I heard that you kind of monitor the wild horses out there, So we started talking a little bit. And I would say probably a few weeks after I met her for the first time. And one thing led to another. And she said, hey, since you're coming here every week and spending hours out there, would you like to join me to do what I'm doing here already? And it's to help and monitor the wild horses and look for anyone that might have an injury or anything unusual, essentially. So this is how it started within 2 months. And my life changed completely from there, because I was an avid mountain climber, a hiker, and I was doing this 2 to 3 times a week. When I started basically looking for the wild horses and started doing what I was doing with them, I almost basically stopped doing anything else. It was just about the horses. It became the passion. It's so hard to explain, but it becomes very personal. Yeah. It's a personal experience.
You become very attached to all of them, and not just like a couple, right? Not just the ones you know by name or whatever, but like all of them you kind of become very attached.
Yeah. And it was, and of course, this lady, Tara, she would name them. And of course, I got to name that foal. So I named her Marigold. And of course, the first time she tells me about anything that's unique to horses, like this Palomino and all that. And I'm saying, okay, I got to go to Google and start searching for all these terminology and what's a good name for a wild horse and a female and all that. Anyway, it's been quite fascinating. And I think, like you said, you get very attached to them. But also you start looking at what's missing. The horses out there are, anyway, outside Vegas are thinner, which makes sense because they don't eat as much. There is a water source. There's actually, I found out there was a quarry there that built a natural pond for them and had done this for the last 20 years and continue to do so to provide a water source for them.
Yeah, that's
because everybody was wondering, how do they survive with little water out there? But that is the reason.
Yeah, they're big animals. Even if they're smaller than normal, they need probably a lot of water.
Yeah, and I can tell you, I would often hike, we'll say in kilometers, but 20 kilometers in the heat with, all the equipment, 4 liters of water and food just to look for them.
Yeah.
So it's quite something.
It's quite the journey, yeah.
It is.
What got you involved with the Wildies, actually? How did you transfer from Vegas and the American Mustangs to the Wildies?
So before we even knew we were moving here, I started to do some research, and my sister lived in Calgary, so I started doing research for Alberta wild horses, and found several groups, but of course you don't know who's doing what, and started following HAWS and a few other groups just to learn a little bit about what was going on. But to read about them is not the same as being here. So once we moved here in April 2024, I started, okay, well, now I got to look west of Sundre. I'm just going to drive there and see. I was basically driving everywhere in that location just to look for them. I didn't know exactly where Williams Creek was, but I did eventually find out. Mm-hmm. And the first thing I discovered when I actually found the main locations is how different the horses were from the ones I was used to in Vegas. They were massive. They were quite big. But the biggest difference was obviously the size, but also the fact that there were more predators that they had to deal with versus in Vegas, very little predators out there.
Yeah.
The mountain lions were usually in the mountains, not so much in the land where the horses were. So there wasn't much that they had to deal with, except for the heat, which is
the climate itself,
which is very, very difficult.
Yeah,
for sure.
I couldn't survive it.
That's for sure. It's a tough one.
It really is. What was the turning point for you that pushed you from just caring and wanting to help these animals to actually standing up and fighting as a voice for them?
I think the turning point was the more I learned about what was going on, because like I said, you hear stories from various sources, and some groups are really good at telling you one story, but it's not usually reality when you see what they're actually doing. Once I start finding out the challenges that the government didn't seem to care, then just think they're just feral horses and that they don't belong there. Started to find out about the fact that there were only less than 10% of foals that would survive due to predators. And so when I start adding all these situations together, I started getting concerned because I'm not saying I moved here because my sister is here, but also a big reason why I moved here was to continue to do what I was doing in Vegas, which is to work with wild horses. And I started taking this very personally, the fact that I'm coming here and I see it felt like a dire situation where I'm finding that we have a big battle on our hand that we have to fight. And if we don't put the pressure and continue to do so, we're just going to lose them.
Yeah. And I'm going off tangent a little bit here, but I find it so ridiculous that they say, they're invasive species or they don't belong, because if you spend one season in Alberta out in Sundre near the mountains, that something that doesn't belong wouldn't be able to survive the cold winters and then the hot summers right after.
Exactly.
So, yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Why do you think there's a need to designate the Alberta mountain horse as a naturalized species versus its current classification of feral? So, first of all, calling them feral seems to be just doesn't make any sense to me, and is basically completely against all the science that we know about the wild horses. Yeah.
It makes no sense whatsoever. They've been here for centuries now. They reproduce, they adapted to the environment, to the eastern slope, and they continue to adapt, and they survive pretty much every season. So to say that they're feral after all this time just doesn't seem to be logical. It seems to be more a narrative based on something else that the government wants to do versus what is reality and what should happen.
What do you think we as a society would lose if there were no more wild horses, both here, America, wherever?
You lose it's not, and it's, obviously it's about the animal, but it's not just about the animal, because you lose the history. So for example, even here, you go back in time, there's a lot of incredible stories from hundreds of years ago between the horses and the native and the various people that used to live here. So you're losing an entire I'm losing track here. I just went off track. So
That's all right.
I had all this prepared too. So, oh boy.
If you need to take a look at your notes, feel free.
No. It's more that my brain was already on the next question.
Fair enough.
Sorry.
Oh, nothing to be sorry about. What has been the most memorable moment you've had with these wild horses?
So I've had a few, but there is one that, first of all, I'll never forget. And I mean, like I said, there's been multiple, but there's one for me that stands out above all of it. And it happened in January 2025, last year. And of course, every weekend I would drive to Williams Creek and just drive around and so on. And at the time, we hadn't seen White Spirit in months, several months. But not just that, he was badly injured. So we started to get very, very concerned. And to make matters even, I wouldn't say worse, but to make this situation even more powerful for me, I'd never seen White Spirit before.
Oh.
So I believe it was January 4th, 2025 or January 5th. I'm driving there and it's very quiet. Didn't see anybody around. There was no other horses around. And as I'm driving, I'm getting there and I turn around and I see this white horse just standing there alone. And of course, I wasn't 100% sure it was him, but I said, it's got to be him based on the pictures, because I studied obviously the pictures and everything else. And 2 minutes later, Joanne King actually just passed by and she said, did you see White Spirit? I said, shit, it was him. So I was completely excited. I spent hours there with him taking pictures and just looking at his condition and shooting several videos. But the excitement wasn't just I saw him for the first time, because that alone is an experience, because he's such a well-known horse.
So famous.
But also the fact that we didn't know, like it's not unique to him to disappear for a while, but he was so badly injured, and the fact that then he disappeared for, it may have been 3 months, 4 months at the time, was a huge concern. So when I saw him and I got confirmation that it was him, it's just, now, every time, I'm not kidding, every time I drive in Williams Creek, I look at the spot, even if I know he's not there, because he's only there in the winter, I still look just because I remember that moment.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it was just such a powerful moment for you.
It was, for sure.
What do you think the biggest obstacles are to the preservation of the Alberta mountain horse?
The biggest obstacle is obviously, I mean, aside from the predators and the survival fall rate, is the government, basically, because it's very difficult to convince a group of people or a political group that has a set narrative, and there's never any proof. They're very good at talking. They're very good at describing the situation in their own way, but there is no proper data. There is no scientific proof on anything they're saying. And trying to convince these people that this is not the case is very complicated. And the only way to fight this is to put a lot of pressure on them, essentially. And not just us, but we have to show exactly what the situation is and get people to help us to continue to put pressure on them by providing the right science data, essentially.
Yeah, every time they publish something that's false, you have to combat it with irrefutable evidence, essentially, or they're not going to take it down. So,
and the other thing I'm finding is I'll go to some of the forums and I'll politely comment, not disagreeing on actual reality of the situation. And next thing I know, my comments are removed.
No.
And so I go and I send a personal message and they respond, in kind. I was like, it's the wrong response because it's the usual message that they put out there. And I'm thinking, they don't want people to hear the truth. So they just filter the messages, but they'll talk to you privately.
Yeah, it's really interesting.
It is interesting. And that's why, like I said, the only way to fight them is to get as many people as possible to put pressure on them, whether it's email, phone calls, letters to the various governments.
You need to become a voice that's so big they can't ignore it.
Exactly.
Right? Yeah. Absolutely. And we ask the same 3 questions at the end of each interview. The first one is, why should people care about any of these horses?
I mean, for me at this point, and people should care because they're basically part of the heritage. Like I said, they've been here for hundreds of years. They've established themselves. They don't disturb anyone. And they're part of the history, just like other wildlife that we have. And losing that would be losing part of a history for us.
What can people listening or watching the podcast do to help?
You know what? I was thinking about this question a lot. And to be honest, I think a lot of the time people are misguided. There's tons of misinformation out there. And I think that usually leads people to the wrong conclusion. And I can't just say to people, educate yourself, because what does that actually mean, right? So to be honest, which is what I did as well, is listening to your podcast and your previous guest, which had scientific information and actual data and details about the wild horses. So listening to your podcast and listening to the people that came before me will give people the right information, and then they can make the decision based on this. Because even for me, before I discovered the truth, it's like, well, what is the truth, right? Because you're listening to various groups and there's 2 different truths until you see the actual data that is provided. And you're saying, what the government's saying just doesn't make any sense. So for me, it's like, don't take everything you read as gospel. Do your research, listen to this podcast and others that are like this, and from there make your informed decision.
I know because I'm in school right now, and there's been several people in my college where they're like, oh, why would you want to help the horses? They're feral. And I'm like, well, the data kind of says they might not be. And then I've actually learned so much from doing this podcast that I can regurgitate the facts and say, well, the government had to take that down from their website because it wasn't true and stuff. So
I mean, and to be honest, it's not that. I think people mean well. They just don't know. But it just shows you that it's easy to push misinformation out there and get a lot of people to think that it's true, which is why we have to work even harder to move that aside and show what the situation actually is.
Absolutely. And then for my final question, is there anything else you would like listeners to know about the Alberta mountain horse, or even the Mustangs, if that's what you want to talk about?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I've seen them not just in Vegas. I've seen them in Utah. I've seen some in Arizona. I've seen some multiple states. Here, I've seen some east of Canada and in New Brunswick and all that, as well as obviously Alberta. But I think a lot of people don't know what they bring and what they offer. And a lot of the time, what I say to people is, come with me, I'll take you out there, and then you can make your own decision. I think being out there in presence of those horses and other wildlife as well, give people a completely different perspective. I've had friends that came from other provinces that visited, and I took them out there, and first of all, they had no clue there were so many wild horses, but their reaction and the way they felt when they saw them for me was priceless.
Yeah.
And I think sometimes people see them just as it's just another animal, until you're there and you actually see how they interact with each other, and the more you learn from them, the more you want to learn even more.
Yeah, I think for me, especially going out and physically seeing them, it changes them from a picture on a screen or words on a page to something living.
Exactly, right? So I think it's too easy to just say, it's just another animal. But when you're out there and actually seeing what happens, and I never thought I would bring this up in this podcast. When I was thinking about Sterling and Rose, for example, as an example of two horses, and now the two of them have interacted with each other. So it wasn't just, for me, it was a learning, quite the lessons, like looking at the interaction between the two and how the main stallion was helping the female that was injured, and how he continued to do so, and how he protected her. So you start understanding that these horses have feelings, and they're obviously very intelligent, and no offense to human beings, but a lot of the time I find a little bit more. So that's why I'm saying, right, to see them in person, it's not just an object, right? You start saying that they have some incredible interaction. They have a lot of passion, and they do bring a lot to people of Alberta.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for your time, Sylvain.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Perfect. Thank you. Thank you so much for listening to today's episode. The amount of support we have received from you has really meant a lot, and it brings us closer to seeing these beautiful animals saved. A huge thank you to Sylvain and everyone that I was lucky enough to interview this season. If you want to help, there are a ton of different things you can do. If you live in Canada, you can write to your local member of parliament or directly to the Minister of Parks in Alberta. If you aren't as comfortable doing that, or you don't live in Canada, you may wish to follow the Help Alberta Wildlife Society, HAWS or HAWS, on Facebook to get more involved and see what other things you can do. There's also the Alberta Mountain Horse Preservation Society on Facebook. You might also want to go check out, see what they're doing to help. The information for both of these groups can be found in the show notes for this episode, and if you haven't already, I highly recommend giving them a follow. And of course, if you want to support the podcast, you want to see more episodes, every single like and comment means a lot. And clicking subscribe on YouTube will do even more for us. Every little bit truly does help, and it allows me to show tangible proof that people care. If you'd be so kind as to share this with friends or family that you think might be interested in this topic, or who you think would want to help, I would really appreciate it. If you want to follow us on social media, you can find us on Twitter, Facebook, and Blue Sky using the tag @TheWildyWest. For any business inquiries, please contact us at thewildywest@gmail.com. I'm your host, Chase McGoran. Thank you once again for listening to The Wildy West.